Welcome to video 6, mitosis. So if you can see the background on this title page, this is actually a cell undergoing mitosis. And hopefully by the end of this video you'll be able to tell which phase of mitosis is undergoing. Before we go into mitosis, I want to cover the cell cycle again and note that there's two main phases of the cell life cycle: interphase, where the cell develops and prepares for mitosis, and mitosis, where the cell will actually duplicate into two cells. Before we go on again, let's review what happens before mitosis, especially in regards to first the S phase. Can you remember what happens in the S phase of mitosis? That's the synthesis phase, of interphase, I'm sorry. The synthesis phase of interphase that we might need for mitosis. So the DNA replicates in the S phase of interphase, and that we definitely need two copies of DNA in order for mitosis to happen. And just as a review again, so one chromosome can replicate into two sister chromatids, and these are identical. And despite there being two chromatids, which are these things here, there's only one chromosome. Although this and this can also be chromosomes each, but it's one chromosome because they have the identical information, if you can remember what we learned in class. Now there's one more thing that actually happens in mitosis before mitosis in the G2 phase. What do we need before we move on to mitosis? So we need enough mitosis promotion factor, or MPF, to move on. And if you remember, cyclin starts to increase during the S phase, and once we have enough cyclin in order to bind with CDK, we're able to make enough MPF. So cyclin plus CDK makes MPF. And then once you have enough MPF, you can move on to mitosis. Mitosis takes place in somatic cells only, mostly, and I think we covered what somatic cells are at the end of the last video. They are actually, they're actually body cells, normal cells that aren't sex cells or gametes. So in this image here, which ones are gametes and which ones are somatic cells? So sperm and eggs are gametes, they're sex cells, so these are not somatic cells. Everything else undergoes mitosis all the time. So when you work out hard and your muscles tear a little bit and they need to replicate, mitosis happens there. If you cut your skin and you need to heal that, how does that heal? Mitosis. Pretty cool, right? Mitosis has 5 main stages: prophase, prometaphase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and telophase. And the reason prometaphase, I put that in parentheses, is because it's kind of like a substage that helps link prophase to metaphase, and also because the name is prometaphase. And if you remember PMAT for prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, hopefully you'll remember prometaphase because it's a combination of prophase and metaphase. We'll go over what those stages do individually in just a second. And finally, this is actually not a stage of mitosis, but cytokinesis happens at the end of mitosis, in which the cells break apart into two identical sister cells. To recap real quick, in interphase, we have our DNA in the nucleus all over the place. It's just DNA as a nucleic acid, and they're you can't really see them with a normal microscope. But in prophase, what happens is that the chromosome, the DNA comes together, coils around histones to make chromosomes. and you'll be able to see them better that way. And this two sister chromatids, so this one, and this one, will be joined together in the middle by a centromere, which is, I can't move forward. By a centromere, which is this little thing right here. Oh no. Right here. It's a little protein that holds the two sister chromatids together. We'll talk about the centromere in just a second again. But to go back, once the chromosomes are formed by the DNA coiling around histones, and the two sister chromatids are joined together by the centromere, the nucleus also starts to dissolve. As you can see here, the nucleus starts to dissolve, and these little proteins here, called the centrosomes, move over to the two sides of the cell. These centrosomes are actually duplicated in interphase, and they're going to play a big role in mitosis. So in prometaphase, the centrosomes, in prometaphase, the centrosomes release these protein string kind of things called microtubules, and these things are going to connect to the centromeres on the sister chromatids. And in metaphase, the microtubules connect to the sister chromatids here by the kinetochore. So let me write that bigger here. Kinetochore, which is another little structure on the centromere where the microtubules can bind. So the microtubules bind to the kinetochore, which is on the centromere and the centromere is the protein that holds the two sister chromatids together. So the microtubules bind to the kinetochore, and there are these proteins called motor proteins which help the chromosomes move into a line, as you can see here, into a line in the center of the cell. And as you can see, each sister chromatid is on each side of the cell and is linked to a microtubule. Next, in anaphase, as you can see here, the sister chromatids are pulled apart. The microtubules, the motor proteins move so that the centromeres are broken apart, and the microtubules string in the sister chromatids to either side of the cell. So you can see kind of how it's already gravitating towards each side, and we're getting ready to make two different distinct cells. And lastly, in telophase, you can see in this drawing here that the nucleus is starting to reform, and then the cell starts to pinch in order to separate the two cells and make a crease for that to happen. And finally, those are all the 4 stages of mitosis, and mitosis is completed kind of by cytokinesis, which is the splitting of the two cells. So you can see 2 cells being formed here, and at this point the chromosomes unwind themselves. You can take the histones away, and the nucleus the membrane is clearly formed, and they're 2 distinct cells, but of course remember here that they are identical. One last thing, I want to note that cytokinesis in plants are different from cytokinesis in animals. See here how in animals the two cells, the cell is pinched in half to make two cells in cytokinesis. However, in a plant cell, vesicles are fused together to form a cell plate, which is here, cell plate, which forms into the cell wall here, and then they split up, and that's how plant cells are split up into two cells. So to recap, in interphase we duplicate the DNA, and but we're not able to see the DNA yet, and then you can here see the centrosomes have already duplicated themselves as well. In prophase, the DNA come together around histones to make chromosomes, and then organize themselves into sister chromatids, which are held together by centromeres. And you can also see that the nucleus is starting, oh, I guess you can't really see in this picture, but the nucleus will start to break apart and, to break apart. In prometaphase, the nucleus further breaks apart, and the centrosomes will orient themselves on the two outer opposite ends of the cell, and will release microtubules which will connect to the centromeres of the sister chromatids via the kinetochore. In metaphase, oh, this is weird, it goes this way. In metaphase, the microtubules and the motor proteins will work together in order to align the sister chromatids in a line in the middle of the cell, having one sister chromatid on one side and one sister chromatid on the other. And I just wanted to mention that metaphase is actually the longest phase because it takes time to get them aligned exactly how it is necessary in order for this to work. And in anaphase, the two sister chromatids are separated, the centromeres are broken apart, the motor neurons pull on them to break them, and then the sister chromatids move towards each side of the cell. And finally, in telophase, the nucleus is starting to reform. Here, in an animal cell, the cell will pinch in and cleave, and in a plant cell, a cell plate will start to be formed. And finally, after these phases, we have cytokinesis, in which cytokinesis in an animal cell, in which these cells will completely split apart and become two duplicate, identical DNA, genetically identical cells. And it's really interesting to think here that they're kind of like identical twins, but more so. Okay, never mind. Alright, and so to end this, I wanted to, since I missed seeing you guys on Friday before Valentine's Day, this is a little cool bio pickup line from Howard of Big Bang Theory. What's actually really cool, though, is that Howard is like an engineer or a physicist or something, and I don't know if he would say things like this. But anyways, have a nice night. I'm just assuming that you're watching this at night, but hopefully you aren't sleeping too late. Good night.